Recording in progress.
Good morning, everyone. I just wanted to welcome you all here for our intergenerational roundtable discussion. My name is Megan Dibbles, and I am the CARICOM Youth Ambassador for Barbados, and I will be moderating the panel discussion today. I just would like to welcome our panelists that we have here in the room, as well as online on Zoom. And obviously, I would like to welcome those who have signed up to watch and are tuning in from Zoom, Facebook, and YouTube. So as everyone knows, today is International Youth Day, and the theme for today is Transforming Food Systems, Youth Innovation for Human and Planetary Health. So we'll be having an intergenerational roundtable discussion, which will be composed of experts in their field, as well as youth advocates and young entrepreneurs who are here to share their perspectives, challenges, and potential solutions. So before we get started, we're going to have some opening remarks. And the first person, what I will do is read the introduction and then move on to the person delivering the remarks. So first of all, we have Roshana Trim, who is the forum lead of UNCTAD 15 Youth Forum. Before I get started, I just wanted to mention that this webinar is being put on by UNCTAD 15 and the United Nations, Barbados, and the Eastern Caribbean. So as I mentioned before, Roshana Trim has committed much of her early life to providing platforms for young people to thrive. As a passionate Caribbean advocate, Roshana found her voice in the Barbados National Youth Parliament, serving as Prime Minister for the period 2014 to 2017. During this time, she harnessed her voice and used her platform both nationally and regionally to advocate on issues facing young people living in Barbados, such as civic participation, mental health, unemployment, education, and sexuality and discrimination. Roshana has been involved in youth-led organizations for over 8 years, and in January 20, became the first woman to chair the Caribbean Regional Youth Council. She is the president of the Barbados Youth Development Council and the lead organizer for the UNCTAD 15 Youth Forum. Additionally, she serves as the project manager for Pink Parliament, an initiative she co-founded, which aims to increase the number of women in Parliament by providing mentorship to girls ages 14 to 20. Roshana, thank you, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Megan. I want to start this morning by expressing my appreciation to the United Nations, Barbados, and the OECS office. This is a great opportunity for us to have a discussion that focuses on a very important aspect of our development as a region, food security. And so once again, on behalf of UNCTAD, the Youth Forum, I do want to express my appreciation. International Youth Day has always offered us an opportunity to introspect and celebrate. This year is really no different. Under the theme Transforming Food Systems, Youth Innovation for Human and Planetary Health, International Youth Day 2021 offers the Caribbean an opportunity to assess our progress on key sustainable development goals. In my mind, these are Sustainable Development Goals 1, 2, 3, 10, 12, 13, 14, and 15. And just in case you are not sure what those goals are, these are really no poverty, zero hunger, good health and well-being, reduce inequalities, responsible consumption and production, climate action, life below water, and life on land. As we approach our deadline of 2030, transforming food systems not only ensures that we can feed our population, but it allows for us to ensure that every individual in the Caribbean has access to food, the opportunity to thrive based on the recognition that what we eat can affect our productivity and our actions. The Food and Agricultural Organization, the FAO, defines food security as physical, social, and economic access to enough food, to enough safe and nutritious food that meets dietary needs and food preference for an active and healthy life at all times. Agriculture plays a key, even if understated, role in the prosperity of this region, the Caribbean region. And it really is critical that as a region, we harness the passion, tenacity, and innovation of young people to ensure and preserve the future health and wealth of this region. It is even more critical that as we continue to navigate and assess the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic and how we build back better and more resilient, that we recognize how important this sector is, as well as the importance of youth within the sector. This morning, I take the opportunity to applaud and highlight young people like Kathleen Carew, Joshua Andrews, and Christina, who are all panelists, for their contribution to the agriculture sector and their commitment to ensuring that young people are actively engaged, and as well as the many other young people who have prioritized agriculture and recognize the importance. Agriculture is a priority for the Caribbean, and I believe that we need to start treating it as such. It is very important that we get over the bias and the view that agriculture is a sector for persons who are unable to succeed academically or persons who have passed their prime. It is important that governments invest in raising awareness as it relates to agriculture. And throughout the pandemic, I have been very happy to see a focus on backyard gardens and farming at home, as well as community gardening. I think for many people, it's very therapeutic. The development of community agricultural spaces, green spaces within community, and the use of space across the region in order to allow for us to grow our own food and to ensure that we can feed our families, even when global supply chains have been disrupted, as we have seen within COVID, is extremely critical. And the reality is that food security not only focuses on what we grow on land, but how we treat to the sea. And so it is equally important that as governments try to figure out how to revive our tourism industries, that we recognize the importance of preserving the sea and life within it in order to ensure that we can continue to use and to embrace the food that we get from the sea in order to feed our populations. Another key part of food security and transforming food security really has to be the use of technology within this sector in order to ensure that we use the innovation such as social media, apps, robotics, artificial intelligence, and other platforms to spread knowledge, build awareness, and to assist farmers in reducing the costs at markets and various things in order to make it both profitable as well as to use it in our country. And I won't be long this morning. And so I acknowledge that the Caribbean is in a water crisis, as is the rest of the world. And so it's really important as well that governments focus on how do we address the water crisis in order to ensure that we can continue to have a robust agriculture sector and that we can build the sectors as it needs to be built. As I close, I want to highlight the healthy school nutrition policy because it's not simply about having enough food, it's about ensuring that our populations are healthy. And so as the healthy school nutrition policy continues to be advocated, particularly in Barbados, and as the Caribbean Coalition for Health continues to advocate to ensure that young people are able to be healthy, and that is prioritized and nutrition is prioritized, that we implement the policy, that we step away from the focus on very processed foods and we get back to healthy and for as well as the work that has been done. It is important to recognize that there has been a lot of work done, not only by governments, but also by young people and by our population in order to ensure that we are able to feed ourselves and that we are able to transform the system. Once again, I take the opportunity to thank everyone who has, the panelists, the organizations who have agreed and who have facilitated this discussion. And I look forward to a very robust discussion. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Roshana. So we'll move on to our second person who will be delivering remarks, and that will be the Honorable Minister Saboto Caesar. He is the Minister of Agriculture in the St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Minister Saboto Caesar is a community activist and advocate for food security. The former Island Scholar and Banana Growers Association scholarship recipient's wide-ranging professional experience was garnered from his work as a lawyer, community worker, government senator, and minister. A lawyer by profession, Minister Caesar has served as the Minister of Agriculture, Forestry, Fisheries, Rural Transformation, Industry, and Labor for the past decade in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. He is currently the ministerial chairman of the Caribbean Regional Fisheries Mechanism. He has championed the Zero Hunger initiative of the FAO in the Caribbean and continues to advance the cause of regional food security. Minister Caesar, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And I want to give my appreciation to all persons who are on the panel and representing several international organizations of the United Nations and other organizations. It is definitely a pleasure and an honor to speak to you this morning, albeit briefly, on matters touching and concerning the youth development in the Caribbean, and how it all connects to food security and food sovereignty. And to first of all posit my mantra that I coined at the age of 22, that in order for the Caribbean to advance, there's a need for an exceptional cadre of multi-talented, multifaceted young persons who are not only reflective on an inward gaze, but are constantly focusing on ensuring that the bill self, and with better persons from the community levels, would have a stronger nations, we'd have stronger nations in the OECS and in CARICOM, and with a stronger sub-region and region, we can better participate in global affairs. Again, I want to recognize International Youth Day and to speak about this issue at this particular juncture in the middle of a pandemic, that we have to be reflective, we have to be celebrative, but we also have to take into consideration that it is a time for us to prepare for the future. 2030 is fast approaching. And in 2030, I will be 50 years old. And I want all the young persons throughout the Caribbean to do an assessment, an age check, because time is ticking. We owe a duty of care as young leaders in the Caribbean to create that framework for growth and development for future generations. Food security and food sovereignty, twinned, they form a significant platform for production and productivity. And there are many opportunities and possibilities if we keep a focus on all of the avenues for national growth and development. I am very appreciative of the work that the FAO is doing in the Caribbean and globally. And I take this opportunity to also recognize the hard work of many of the different groupings within the United Nations in recognizing the disciplines exposed by many different regions and subsectors. St. Vincent and the Grenadines, we continue to advance youth development and youth participation in agriculture. And we're working towards ensuring that it becomes an integral part in all our schools, because it's very important that we continue to teach the next generation to participate in agriculture. For many persons, not until the pandemic and the disruptions in global food production chains, did they realize the critical importance of the agriculture sector? To all the entrepreneurs in agriculture who are listening and a part of the panel, I want to wish you all the very best. Let us keep the network going strong. Thank you very much. And I want to wish you all the best today. Happy International Youth Day. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Minister, for your kind words. And right now we'll move on to our third speaker, who is the UN Resident Coordinator for Barbados and the Eastern Caribbean, Mr. Didier Trabuc. Mr. Trabuc, the floor is yours.
Good morning. Thank you, moderator. Honorable Minister of Agriculture from St. Vincent and Grenadines, Saboto Caesar, Roshana Trim. Good morning to you, esteemed panelists, my UN colleagues, Renata from FAO, Regis from WFP, and all our audience this morning. Well, I think it's a great way to start the day by celebrating the International Youth Days with outstanding youth leaders from across the Caribbean. And we are at the UN really thrilled to partner with the UNCTAD Youth Forum to host this intergenerational young roundtable today in this so important topic. So allow me to say that this unprecedented surge in food insecurity propelled to a large extent by the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic and recent crises as well, including the volcanic eruption in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, makes this year's theme especially relevant to our Caribbean context. In fact, in a recent COVID-19 food security and livelihood impact survey, and I'm sure Regis will elaborate further on this, as it was supported by the World Food Programme, it was concluded that the COVID-19 pandemic is having far-reaching adverse impacts on persons' ability to meet basic needs, including food, particularly amongst, of course, the most vulnerable households. So the need for transformation of food system to achieve food security in this post-pandemic world is terribly critical to lives and livelihoods of citizens across the globe, and it is one that we cannot afford to ignore. So as we move towards the starting of the UN Global UN Food System Summit in September, I would say that now is the time for science, policy, and innovation to be combined into real solutions to transform the way we produce, consume, and even think about food. And we really count on young people to be a major stakeholder in this. And I was 1 hour ago participating until now into the excellent Global Youth-Led Innovation Festival that is organized by the UN Secretary General Special Envoy for Youth, with an audience of more than 6,000 young people from around the globe. And what I told them is that in this climate emergency, where youth are one of the most impacted group actually by the climate and economic crisis, we need to untap the tremendous potential that young people have to serve as change agents for climate action in as well as in this food insecurity situation. But for that, they should be given a voice. As we have observed that when they occupy the public space, they can influence decision-making, which is far too often being paralyzed by short-term considerations. So I think that this UNCTAD 15 Youth Forum is a great example of doing this, and the work you do, Rishana, with your team is really excellent. So first, I think youth stepping up is critical in my opinion. But second, investing in youth is also a precondition, both in finance, equipping them with the technical capacities. And here, at the level of the UN sub-regional team for Barbados and the Eastern Caribbean, we're trying to respond to the call for more meaningful youth engagement. And we have a number of youth-led supportive initiatives ongoing or in the pipeline. I'm sure that my colleagues will talk about that. And we're also in the process of setting up a youth advisory group, which will serve as to capture the perspectives, the idea of a core group from all our 10 countries and territories in order to integrate those suggestions, those ideas into our cooperation framework and work program of UN agencies. So you will hear more about that in the coming weeks. In the interim, what I would say is that we encourage all youth, wherever you are, to play your part in making a difference through innovative solutions. And I want to highly commend our esteemed panel today for their ongoing contribution to the sustainable development of this region. I'm truly encouraged to see today's caliber of the youth, and less young too, participating in this roundtable. So many of you have successfully pivoted from other professional endeavors to pursue innovative social enterprises in agriculture and for the common good. So I think this is quite impressive, and you must be commended for this. So I know that we are in for a very dynamic, productive discussion. I really thank you all and all our audience for joining us today. So my final message would be that we need to bring young people at the core of decision making, and to all youth, really keep it up, step up with your passion. We need you to make a difference. So thank you, and again, happy International Youth Day.
Thank you, Mr. Trabuc, for your words. At this point, we're going to just play a short video, which speaks to the feelings of the young people across the region as it relates to transforming food systems. The title is Caribbean Youth Have Their Say on Transforming Food Systems. Thank you.
In the Caribbean, a resilient food system means decreasing our dependence on imported goods and increasing our support of our local farmers. It means returning to our agrarian roots, using modern innovation and sustainable practices to ensure the well-being of both the people and the environment.
A resilient food system is having a system in place so that the people of the country will not suffer because of a disaster or because of the country's inability to import food items.
It means that we are able to put food on the table no matter what crisis we may face.
Resilient food systems mean climate-smart agricultural practices that can feed and nourish our future generations to come.
Being able to bounce back after a food shortage and having access to food supply for everyone's need.
A resilient food system is multifaceted as well as proactive in implementing strategies to resist disturbances.
A resilient system means the capacity of people to produce and access nutrition
and culturally acceptable food to all in the face of change and even unforeseen circumstances.
A resilient food system ensures the inclusion and participation of the most marginalized in society, including women, youth, the aging, and the disabled. By ensuring the participation of the most marginalized in food systems, we are also ensuring the economic stability of all, as well as the health and wellness of our future generations.
Thank you for that video. That was a great introduction to our panel discussion, having an idea of how young people feel about transforming food systems in the region. That being said, I'm going to move on to the introduction of our panelists. We have quite the esteemed panelists here, and I will begin with the one and only Dr. Renata Clark. She's a sub-regional coordinator for FAO Caribbean. Dr. Renata Clark has worked at the FAO headquarters in the area of food safety for the past 20 years. She served as head of the Food Safety and Quality Unit from 2011 to 2019. Prior to assuming her current role, Dr. Clark oversees the FAO Next, we have Mr. Regis Chapman, who is the country director of the World Food Program here in the Caribbean. Mr. Chapman has over 20 years of international development and humanitarian experience, including the past 15 years working with the United Nations World Food Program in a variety of contexts. Currently, he served as the head of office for the WFP Barbados, overseeing emergency preparedness and response in the Caribbean. Welcome, Mr. Chapman. Next, we have Ms. Keely Holder, who is the Chief Agriculture Officer in the Ministry of Agriculture and Food Security here in Barbados. Ms. Keely Holder was appointed Barbados's Chief Agriculture Officer in February 2021, the first female and youngest in history. Congratulations. Ms. Holder has a long history in agriculture, having held leadership roles on various agricultural bodies, including the Barbados National Union of Farmers, Barbados Agriculturist Society, and Barbados Fruit and Vegetable Growers, just to name a few. Ms. Holder holds a bachelor's in biology and computer science from Cave Hill Campus UE and a postgraduate diploma in crop production and water management from the Galilee Institute in Israel. Next, we have Mr. Richard Ramprasad. He's the Value Chain and Agribusiness Specialist at the Inter-American Institute for Cooperation on Agriculture, also known as ICA. Mr. Richard Ramprasad is an agribusiness and value chain specialist with ICA Trinidad and a firm believer in the grow what you eat and eat what you grow philosophy. He has over 16 years experience in the agriculture and agribusiness sector, both nationally and regionally. An advocate for food self-reliance at the household and community and national levels, Mr. Ramprasad commits his spare time to support groups in achieving this. Next, we have Christina Puller, who is an agriculturist and representative of Slow Food Barbados. Ms. Christina Puller is a third-generation Barbadian agriculturalist and owner of Xanateria Farms, which produces livestock and vegetables with an apiary at the latest edition. An innovator at heart, she has combined agricultural training with her background in building and civil engineering and computer science to encourage creativity and create sustainable patterns of design on the farm. Ms. Pooler currently works with a number of national and regional agricultural-based businesses, associations, and research institutions. Next, we have Jeshuran Andrew. He's the CEO of Jadone Farms Limited in St. Lucia. Mr. Jeshuran Andrew is a longstanding entrepreneur, agriculturalist, and youth advocate. He is the CEO of Jadone Farms Limited and an agricultural extension officer with St. Lucia's Ministry of Agriculture for over 10 years. He is the recipient of several national youth awards, including the Most Outstanding Youth in Entrepreneurship in 2015, Most Outstanding Youth in Agriculture in 2018, and Most Outstanding Fellow in Youth Development in 2019. Then we have Joshua Fort, founder of Red Diamond Compost here in Barbados. Joshua Fort is the founder and CEO of Red Diamond Compost, a biotech social enterprise with the mission of ensuring everyone has access to clean, nutrient-rich foods. Red Diamond creates clean and green agrochemical solutions designed to support the fragile organisms responsible for building soil structure, storing organic soil carbon, cycling nutrients to plants, and protecting pollinating insects. As an advocate of regenerative organic agriculture, Mr. Fort's work with organizations in various capacities across the region and internationally has awarded him recognition as an expert in the field of climate smart environmental management. And last but not least, we have Ms. Keithlyn Carew. She is the founder of Helen's Daughter, St. Lucia. Ms. Keithlyn Carew is an advocate and change maker in the fields of gender equity in agriculture and rural development in St. Lucia. She is also the founder of Helen's Daughters, a regionally recognized and award-winning nonprofit organization that focuses on rural women's economic empowerment through advocacy, capacity development, and improved market access. The organization started in 2016 when it was selected as one of the winners of UN Women's Empower Women Champions for Change program. Welcome, panelists. And at this point, we will definitely move on to the discussion. I just wanted to say that this panel discussion is intended to be more of a casual discussion among stakeholders. We want to encourage dynamic interaction with everyone here. So anyone who has an opinion, feel free. By all means, you're encouraged to participate at any opportunity. So we'll move on to the first question. And the first question, which will be posed to Renata, and then probably open up to the floor, is this. Some persons may be unfamiliar with the term food systems and how it interconnects with our livelihoods. What are some ways we can help educate persons, especially the youth, on the importance of strong food systems and food insecurity?
Thank you, Megan. After listening to your video, I don't know if you need me to explain. Many of you seem to be already very aware. Rather than citing a definition of food systems, I'd really like to emphasize the sense of the difference between food chains, when we speak of food chains, and what we mean when we speak of food systems. So food chains, when we speak of food chains, we're speaking of the actions and the actors from production of food through handling, marketing, trading, transport to consumption. When we speak of food systems, we're thinking much more holistically. We're thinking not only of the chain, but of all of the things that the chain affects and the things that affect the chain. So the food systems thinking puts conscious attention on health and well-being of consumers, the livelihoods of farmers and fisherfolk, the resilience of their communities, the state of our natural resources. One of our speakers this morning spoke about water, our land resources, our oceans, our biodiversity. So the signs of dysfunction of food systems are around us. They include the obesity, high levels of obesity and NCDs, low agricultural productivity, food loss and waste, degraded soils, low efficiency of water use in agriculture, overfishing, and high levels of poverty among agricultural communities. So there's plenty wrong with our food systems. There's plenty to be put right, if I switch that around. And the youth has to lead the way to getting things right. So it's important to understand, to be in the right frame of mind when we are thinking of food systems. We are thinking holistically and towards sustainability and the good, optimizing the good for the most.
I really like how you put that answer in terms of looking at it holistically. Before we move on, I would just like to acknowledge that we have two more amazing panelists here that I made a slight oversight. So I would like to introduce Chris Moranci. He is the founder of Generation Honey in Dominica. Chris was first introduced to agriculture through beekeeping. Learning about the effects bees had on individuals' livelihoods and foods excited Chris, leading him into pollination services. Chris realized that in Dominica, not many farmers pay attention to the presence of bees and how they affect their crops. Therefore, in 2019, he founded Generation Honey, which is aimed at promoting more natural and organic agriculture as a key player in the fight against non-communicable diseases. We have Nia Talbot. She's an agroecologist and founder of Full Belly Farm in the British Virgin Islands. Nia Talbot is an agroecologist and educator, producing food in harmony with nature while teaching others to do the same. Nia received a bachelor's in sustainable agriculture and agroecology from Appalachian State University in 2011 and is celebrating 10 years of working in farm, food, and education in the British Virgin Islands this year. Ms. Talbot founded Full Belly Farm in the wake of Hurricanes Irma and Maria in 2017 to provide a space for community education in regenerative agriculture and permaculture while providing access to beautiful, nutrient-dense food for the market. Welcome, and my apologies again. So Nia, I realize as an educator, you're actually perfectly primed to answer the question, about what are some ways we can help educate persons, especially the youth, on the importance of strong food systems and food insecurity. So Nia, if you don't mind, the floor is yours.
Hi, good morning all. Thank you. Yeah, to begin, I think it's really important to highlight how concerned our youth are today with how our everyday actions are affecting the environment. We all know that agriculture is often framed in a negative light due to its actions upon our environment and our health. Reframing agriculture through education should really begin in the early years. When we speak of youth and young people in the frames of education, we're moving from children all the way through people our age up into our 20s, beginning our careers. Agroecology and regenerative agriculture is not only the best thing that we can do for the planet, but framing this through our education system would pique the interest of youth who are looking for a way to make a change. We're looking to make good choices and forge new careers outside of the mainstream and in environmentally friendly fields. You know, as we know, and as we've said before, the food system touches every sector. So no matter what a young person's interest may fall within, whether it's agriculture or science and technology, medicine, we have opportunities for us to follow our passions and to create positive change. Practical actions that we can take in our education system are implementing things like edible education from the early years, whether this is school gardens, which we have throughout the Caribbean, whether it's collaboration between farms and schools for outreach opportunities, for bringing food into our food systems within schools, into our meal programs. In that way, children and young people gain experience and connection to our food system in practical ways. Children and young people learn by doing, so giving them the opportunities to engage with farmers, to engage with people who are participating in this. Once we understand something, we then learn to care about it and hopefully can bring up new scientists and researchers in agriculture, new farmers, new entrepreneurs. Agriculture is now becoming more and more science and technology driven. It's no longer the way that we used to think of it as an option, as our weekend job. We can make our careers out of it, and we can create change for our climate through agriculture. The food system is the root of so many of our problems globally and within our region, but it is also the place where we can create solutions. So I think it's really hopeful, and framing it in that lens for our young people, it's an arena where we can engage and really take action to create positive change. Young people in the Caribbean are entrepreneurs and we are innovators. Agriculture has so many gaps where we can step in. And if we have the agency and the voice and the opportunity to take action, it all begins from the early years in our education system, creating those hands-on opportunities for us to learn and understand both how nature and agriculture interact. Then we can care about it, and then we can act upon it.
Thank you so much, Nia. I really like the point you made about starting from our early ages. To have an understanding of agriculture and its importance from the time you're in school will definitely go a long way towards creating a passion for something that, as you mentioned, is extremely important, and also its problems contribute to greater problems right now. That being said, I'm going to just move on to the second question that we have here, and that will be for you, Regis. Caribbean SIDS are highly vulnerable to climate-related disasters and external shocks. What mechanisms or policies can be put in place to help build more resilient food systems?
Thanks, Megan, and thank you for inviting us to be part of this panel. Honestly, I think that, as Renata said, the video that was shown and the voices of the youth, and also Roshana, I think largely covered this question and did a very good job of explaining it from the youth perspective, and I think hit many of the points that I wanted to highlight. The resident coordinator mentioned in his opening remarks the CARICOM WFP COVID-19 food security and livelihoods assessments that were conducted. And maybe just to flag a couple of points from that. So in April, food systems dialogue have really shed light again on some of the concerns and challenges within the Caribbean and within SIDS in general, and you know, the reliance on imported goods, particularly food. I think on average, it's estimated around 80% of food is imported into the Caribbean. You know, that the risks or the concerns that arose when the COVID-19 pandemic broke out around transport, global trade, et cetera, I think was an eye-opener for many in this region. And I think there has been a lack of investment in agriculture over the years. And as societies evolve and change, diets evolve and change, and preferences evolve and change. And there's a lot of good that comes out of that. But the vulnerability from the climate crisis, the vulnerability to economic shocks, as we've seen in 2008, and now with the COVID-19 pandemic, really show these vulnerabilities of the Caribbean. So I think, you know, as we look at what some of those solutions are, I think there's no easy solution. There's no magic bullet that will solve all of these. But I think there are a number of things, and certainly the role of youth within agriculture is part of that picture. But in order to build a more resilient food system, I think one of the key aspects is we need universal access to food. People need to be able to afford a healthy diet, and they need to be able to do that year round. And they need to do that in a good year, and they need to do that in the years where we have a major climatic shock or a major economic shock. And what we're seeing now is that's not happening. The cost of food in the region is high. The ability for the poorest and most vulnerable to access that food is a significant challenge. The survey results also showed that while nearly half of the respondents aged 25 and under had experienced a time that they went an entire day over the previous 7 days of that survey without having eaten a meal, despite being hungry. And that compares to 29% of all survey respondents. So we also saw how youth have been impacted. The loss of livelihoods for youth was more significant than more mature in age workers. So we're seeing how there's this vulnerability of food systems. There's a vulnerability in terms of food security in the region. And then we also see that that's heightened for youth. So we need to ensure that systems, national systems, from a disaster management perspective, from an agricultural perspective, from a social protections perspective, ensure that people have the basic food that they need year round.
Thank you so much, Regis, for highlighting those stats. I do believe I'm familiar with that report. And when I read it myself, I was a little surprised by how vulnerable we are, and specifically young people. So young people are most impacted by the vulnerability of our food systems. And that means there's even more impetus to get them involved. So how can young people in the Eastern Caribbean be empowered and mobilized to encourage their meaningful participation across all sectors, including the agriculture sector? Keely, Richard, Ajeshuran, feel free to take this question. Perhaps, Keely, we can start with you.
Yes, hi. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for inviting me to be on this panel. It's a pleasure to be here talking about youth and how we can move more youth into agriculture. You know, as you said, agriculture in the region, the investment has not been what it needed to be, and particularly investment in research and development and innovation. These are the things that will drive agricultural productivity. These are the things that will lead to sustainable farms and sustainable farming enterprises. And so the lack of investment, particularly in that area, has also meant that there has been a lot less engagement for youth. And in fact, what we are seeing is that we now have a serious issue where youth succession is a big problem, because the last time we had a huge amount of innovation and science and R&D behind agriculture, it was in the 70s. And since then, it's been slowly but surely declining. So what we are seeing now is that we actually don't have enough youth who are trained in the agricultural sector, but there is a significant demand coming from youth, a significant interest from youth to be involved in agriculture. The opportunity is there to train young persons now into various aspects of agriculture. And part of it is also kind of breaking down deconstructing the type of work that used to be available or that is available. Traditionally, you would have things like a agronomist, pathologist, veterinarian, and those would be the types of jobs that were available. But then when it came on the farm level, the farmer was the only knowledge worker, and then you had all unskilled labor. So now there's an opportunity to hire skilled persons who are certified crop advisors, irrigation specialists, post-harvest specialists, nursery technicians. So there's a huge amount of skills that are needed in agriculture to be able to build it out in such a way to make it more robust in the types of jobs, in terms of the entrepreneurship that's required and the type of skill set that's required. Now we are in an economy that most of the Caribbean has moved from a factor-driven economy towards an efficiency-driven economy, and therefore the type of entrepreneur that you also need now is moving towards what they call a German or Schumpeterian type of entrepreneur, as opposed to the former type, the Austrian or Chicago type of entrepreneur. So there is a need to train and understand how our economies are shaping, what are the drivers of agriculture, and then have young persons be engaged in and train them in those areas to allow them to be able to truly participate. Because what is currently happening is that young persons come in, they're excited, they all want to go. And then because the systems and the support is not there, there's a huge amount of frustration that you feel, because at every corner you feel that you're getting a roadblock every time. So once we start to put those systems in place, it means that youth can participate more successfully in agriculture. And as opposed to what's happening where we're losing the talent comes, it's excited, it's ready to go, and then the framework is not there for it to work in.
Thank you so much, Keely. I actually really like the point you made about the challenges that they face. The barriers to entry are ridiculously high, and then they face some frustration. So I actually would like to get some input from Jeshurun, since he's the CEO of Jadoni Farms Limited. He would have his own experience with regards to entering that sector and what does it mean. Perhaps you could give us some insight on what were some of the challenges you faced, and perhaps how can we empower and mobilize young people for meaningful participation in the sector.
Good morning, everyone. You hear me clearly?
Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. I would like to start by saying a happy International Youth Day to all the young persons who are tuned in at the moment. It is a time for us to reflect, a time for us to put our minds together to, get past this hurdle as it pertains to youth being involved in agriculture. I think one of the first things that we need to do is to basically change the image of agriculture. We have a lot of the young persons around us who still think that agriculture is this thing for their grandparents, the older persons. And when they look at those grandparents, they notice a trend where they would have pushed a lot of the children out of agriculture into other professions. So there's this narrative built around the image of agriculture that I think it is very important that we take some time to work towards changing it. I remember a few months ago, I went to deliver some products, some eggs, to a young lady who is a baker. And her son said to me, you don't look like a farmer. And in the moment, it really struck me that that 14, 15-year-old boy felt that there is a certain way a farmer is supposed to look. And so it speaks to the narrative that a lot of young people feel and think a certain way about agriculture. And it is high time that we do something to change that narrative. Agricultural insurance is something that I think we need to seriously look into within the region. Price volatility and disaster risk is something that farmers face all the time. And maybe the young person looking at agriculture from the outside, a young person who went to school and can understand the risks that are associated with agriculture, would look at the industry and probably feel a lot safer knowing that there is an insurance that can protect them if they got into agriculture. And so we can find a lot of more young persons getting involved with the fact that we have this agricultural insurance available. I think also young persons have noted the importance for farmer education programs. So, for example, the average farmer who is cultivating a brassica, say Oleracea capitata, which is cabbage, throughout the lifespan of that crop, that farmer would have to use quite a bit of insecticide to keep his crop as healthy as he can. And our farmers need to understand that it is our duty to produce wholesome foods that are safe for our consumers. And we need to ensure that many of those farmers continue to be educated in those areas. A lot of the young people think that if you don't go to school and you study agriculture, then there's very limited knowledge in terms of how to go about cultivating. And I think that is something that we really need to look into. I think land use policies throughout the region that especially protects agricultural lands is also something that we need to seriously consider. We need to recognize that over the years, agricultural lands, as it passes down through the family, the size of those parcels of land over time becomes smaller and smaller and smaller. And so we need to be able to protect those parcels of land so that economy of scale can be achieved in terms of cultivation and that sort of thing. We are at a point where we need to also start thinking outside of the box. So what is preventing a couple or few young persons within a community to all have small greenhouse units in their backyard, and they collectively produce for a certain market? There is nothing preventing a group of young persons within a community from coming together and doing such an initiative. Why don't we see our governments establishing greenhouse facilities where you have 50 to 100 greenhouses within a certain space? They share security features to limit the effects of predator larceny. And we have young persons who can come in to rent a space, rent one of those greenhouses to use to get into agriculture. We can have, the support of development banks to help those young persons finance those ventures and really get into agriculture. I think also as a region, we are in the best place to make use of solar energy. Our farmers use a lot of energy throughout the production cycle, whether it be with poultry, whether it be in agro-processing or whatnot. And it's important that we're able to drive some programs that allow our farmers to see the benefit of harnessing solar power. We're in the tropics, we're in the Caribbean region, and it is something that can be beneficial to us throughout the year. I think also someone mentioned the fact that we need to be able to reduce on our import. It's very important. And we would not be able to successfully do that if we don't have national crop production scheduling programs that the government carefully ensures that it is well tailored. So at any point in time during the year, a farmer needs to be able to call this service and find out what are the crops that it makes sense to plant or cultivate over the next few months, over the next few weeks. And we can have this entity very well guiding those farmers and allowing them to plant at times of the year where the supermarkets or the hotels would have been able to import in other years. So these are just a few of the things that I think we can do to encourage young persons to get into agriculture. Like I said in the beginning, we really need to encourage that change in the image, change the narrative, how young people look at agriculture. And then we can see some meaningful involvement in terms of young people getting into agriculture and selecting it as a career choice.
Thank you so much, Jasharun, for that response. I definitely agree that the image of agriculture needs to change. It probably is the same as it's been for the last how many decades, and that definitely doesn't help encouraging young people to enter the field. So we do have a few entrepreneurs who have been innovative in their field of agriculture. So I wanted to ask specifically two of our panelists, if given the opportunities, young people have the potential to be innovative entrepreneurs, what have you done as youth to innovate? Josh, this question is for you. And then Chris, I would love to hear your opinion on that.
Right, thank you and good morning to everyone and happy International Youth Day. One of the things, or the main thing really that I've been able to do is looking at what a major challenge was, a major issue was, really and truly. And for me, that started with looking at the health situation, because that's how I really got into it. Looking at my own health crisis that I was going through back in 2011, and then looking at the state of my local community. We had young persons, from as young as 9 years old or even younger, dealing with cancer and a whole bunch of other chronic degenerative diseases. And really getting an understanding of the role that food and nutrition specifically plays in the quality of life that we have. And just through wanting to find first a solution for myself, and then realizing this problem was, a lot bigger, a lot more people were being affected by this issue when it comes to being able to access clean, nutrient-rich foods. So that was the platform that I kind of started from, towards how would we be able to achieve this? How would we be able to produce these clean, nutrient-rich foods? And that starts firstly with the process of not using toxic chemicals, not using toxic inputs, when it comes to our food production, both for the environmental aspect of it, being able to protect the biodiversity and the beneficial organisms, but also for our health, because, at the end of the day, this is the food that we are consuming. So then it looks at then what inputs can we add? And that's where I have created a range of fertilizers, biostimulants, and working on various crop protection products that are made primarily from plant-based animal-based resources. We've mostly been working with the sargassum seaweed in particular in developing a biostimulant, and now reformulating into a new type of fertilizer. But through this process, I've been able to more or less come up with a formulation or a recipe for looking at various types of materials, again, plant, animal-based, invasive plant species especially, and being able to figure out how do we convert these into these agricultural inputs that, again, support biodiversity, support, again, reducing greenhouse gas emissions in these different types of areas. This all goes hand in hand with the practices that farmers would be using, and we promote those organic and regenerative practices. So I see it as really being able to identify some key challenges and issues that are affecting a wide group of people, and being able to come up with solutions for it. Now, I would say it has been a very difficult and challenging journey for sure. And I'm thankful that I have had a certain level of conviction and drive to be able to overcome them. But one of the things that is really needed is greater investment, which is mentioned, especially when it comes to research and development in the sector, but also the certain level of general services, support, and infrastructure that would help young persons like myself and others who have not just ideas, but have done a certain level of work to be able to create their different products or business models. And then how do we provide them the level of support that allows them to scale a lot quickly?
Thank you so much for that, Josh. Before we move on to McChris, you mentioned that the journey has been difficult. So could you just share with us some of the difficulties that you faced along the journey? And for anyone listening, how did you overcome them, or what were some supporting mechanisms that you had in place?
So I would say the one of the main things was access to finance, which, a lot of my colleagues and peers, panelists, would face that challenge, access to finance, and really trying to get an understanding of the environment that you're in from the perspective of your country and the region. And, what options do you even have? And for me, my particular situation, I didn't really have many options. The path that I was able to take, again, because I had, like I said, such a strong conviction, I wasn't going to let anything stop me whatsoever. So, was looking into, okay, if within my local, say within my country, I was not able to find a path, I would then look to my region. Who is it that I know? And it really came through networking, starting to follow a thread in terms of networking with persons who are interested in the same area that I am, who are providing support, whether that is any types of training, any type of accelerators, incubation programs, and really connecting with these persons and connecting with their networks as well to see what steps I can take to help me get Red Diamond Compost to where I see it. So I would say that has been one of the main challenges, more than anything else. I would still say there's been an upside to it for me. One of the things people look at in terms of the power of growth, whereby you have to use a certain level of creativity or innovativeness to be able to overcome these challenges, which I'm thankful that I've been able to do. And it really helps, I say, strengthen you or shape you in being able to tackle, other challenges going forward. But yeah, I would say the access to finance has been the main challenge.
Thank you, Josh. I'm sure there are many young entrepreneurs who face that same challenge. So hopefully soon institutions can work together to alleviate that particular grievance. Chris, what have you done as a youth to innovate in this field?
Okay, good day to all. I had some technical difficulties with myself, just figuring out myself and what I really wanted. So I was figuring out some healthy ways because the ways I had before were totally unhealthy, and I watched my reactions to the products I used to take. And I used to wonder why we in Dominica are not more health conscious and watching the negative effects of processed foods to our bodies, to the natural foods. So I was questioning everybody else but myself. So I started to question myself, and I started to become the change I wanted to seek instead of looking at other individuals. So in that aspect, I was still consuming sugars, all processed. So I had to change my intake and watch the results I got from the natural living. So with that now and changing my way, my family members around me actually start to see the change and the improvements I started to make. They were not aware of the diet I changed, but after they start to see it, and even the individuals in my community, they started to see it as well. So with that, I see you have to change yourself, and then you will impact everybody else around you. Also, as Joshua mentioned about the finances, that is a major thing for us to focus on our ideas, build up ourselves and our ideas to contribute to everybody else, and still focus on raising capital. So that is an extra strain on us. So the process I am going through right now is figuring out ways to feed the people and try not to really focus on the funds. Ways I can positively feed the people, and as I going along, answers coming to me and I implementing them. Yeah, and that's it. I have one more point. Also, looking at our competition, we'll have to say the processed foods. And if you look at the processed food section, they are way ahead of us. You can find them in all our stores around the Caribbean, and you will not find too much of our local farmers and goods in our stores. So I was thinking, like, if we watch their process and if we could reverse engineer what they're already doing, but bring it on the natural side, I believe we'll make a bigger dent in the natural sector of things.
Thank you so much, Chris, for that. I definitely believe in the sentiment that you alluded to in terms of change really does start with you. And once you can change yourself, then you have a better chance of impacting the environment around you. So I actually want to take a slightly different angle with the next set of questions that I have. And I'm going to begin with Keithlyn or Christina, if you don't mind. In the context of the Eastern Caribbean, gender gaps are quite apparent in the agriculture sector. How can we bridge those gaps and entice more women, especially young women, to be involved in the sector? Keithlyn, as the co-founder of Helen's Daughter, I thought that this would be perfect for you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Chair. And it's really a pleasure to be a part of this distinguished panel. In terms of including and integrating gender into agriculture, I think that oftentimes in a lot of sectors, we don't think of taking an integrative approach, and we think of actors in the sector as just homogenous. Obviously, with women, you have to take the approach of including women differently, just like the approach of having youth or the disabled and so on. And usually what I constantly tell people in terms of increasing the importance of having women in the agricultural sector is that essentially women are the first formal food contact for most human beings. I mean, most of us are nourished by breast milk. And then going forward, most of us in terms of our households, our mothers, our aunts, and so on, are the ones that formulate and develop our food palettes, what we like, and so on, and essentially lead us into whether we eat healthy or whether we don't. So aside from just producing food, women are essentially shaping us as individuals into the lifestyles in terms of foods that we would tend to seek. Now, when it comes to having women integrated into the agricultural sector, I think that I want to touch on a point that Jeshurun actually brought up, which is redefining the narrative of the agricultural sector. With women, I think it's twofold, because one, there's just the hurdle of you don't look like a farmer. A farmer is muddy boots and taking hot sun and so on. But for women on top of that, because a lot of times we've been indoctrinated that, you know, it's the office jobs, the dresses, the high heels, and so on. So there's an expectation even more for us to not go into those types of jobs. On top of that, when we think about just the obstacles that women face, it's similar to what youth face in terms of what we've mentioned before, which is a lack of finance, and then also the access to land, but more so land ownership. And some of Josh and Jeshurun have mentioned that. I think we need to stop, we need to quit with trying to advocate to our traditional banks and thinking that if we advocate enough, we're going to get a different model or different changes in that financial sector. If we look at countries like Jamaica, for example, their lending portfolio in agriculture is about 2%. And that's very common in terms of not only our region, but globally. Banks are risk averse, they're collateral based, and oftentimes they don't invest in agriculture. So we need to look at non-traditional financing mechanisms. I mean, particularly for women, the women that I've worked with, a lot of them have gotten benefits in terms of Massy supermarkets, where there is sort of like a micro lending scheme for women who are already partners and so on. And then I really wanted to touch on Nia's point in terms of agricultural education. What I've found is that because of the perception of women in agriculture and the fact that a woman is not a farmer, you find that they have less access to opportunities because they're not regarded as farmers. And what we did with Helen's Daughters, and what I've noticed, is that there's a general lack, not only in St. Lucia, but in the region in terms of agricultural education and the types of agricultural education. Kili mentioned more modern techniques and so on. And these are things that we're not seeing, not only in the classroom, but outside of the classrooms. And it's because of the lack of knowledge. I think another thing in terms of agricultural education that we have to remember for women is that women tend to take on a larger share of unpaid care. They're the ones taking care of children. They're the ones taking care of the elderly. So how can we tailor programs that will allow for women who have household burdens to actually be able to juggle upskilling themselves in the agricultural sector while also maintaining their household responsibilities? And I think finally, when we look at obviously the policies in place, we need to look at gender mainstreaming our policies. It's not about just having a certain number of
Sorry,
women.
Keithlin, just 1 second. We're not hearing you at this point. Just give me 1 second. I believe there's a slight technical difficulty.
Okay,
Sorry about that.
no worries.
Sorry, you were saying something about, can you hear us?
Yes, loud and clear.
Okay, sorry about that. Just continue your thought with regards to the unpaid paid labor that women face.
Yes, when I was talking about unpaid labor, I basically tied it into agricultural education and so on. We need to look at ways to upskill our women, but also ensure that they're able to maintain a lot of the childcare and elderly care that they are actually taking on. And also in terms of policies, I think in the region, there's a lack of gender mainstreaming in policies, particularly in the agricultural sector. Oftentimes, I will say this, maybe perhaps my panelists may feel differently, but when it comes to youth and women, it's very tokenistic. We'll put a few persons in this meeting, we'll add a few persons to this program, they check the marks, and we have integrated gender and youth in our policies and our programs. And we cannot take this approach if there is an expectation that youth and women are supposed to actually influence agricultural policies and so on. We need to actually have a seat at the table and actually hear our voices heard. And finally, in terms of, I think Keely had mentioned an enabling environment. I think that when we look at the Caribbean region versus the African region, for example, in Africa right now, there's literally an agricultural revolution going on. You're seeing an uptake in modern technologies implemented in agriculture. You're seeing a number of enabling environments being created, like Joshua mentioned, incubators and so on, and accelerators. You're not seeing those types of models emulated in the Caribbean. We're still, as entrepreneurs, as leaders or founders of organizations in the agricultural sector, we're still on the traditional grants basis or trying to get access to loans and so on, when there's incubator models that literally hold your hand throughout the value chain, whether it's from just accessing grants to scale, whether it's from market linkages and so on. And these are the things I'm talking from the perspective not only of women, but also of youth and the most marginalized, that really need to be implemented in our region if we're really going to try to make agricultural policy and the sector inclusive to all.
Thank you so much, Keithlin. You made some very salient points there, especially on the area of tokenism and the various challenges that women face in the agriculture sector. Christina, I know you're the owner of Zanteria Farms, so I'm sure you may have a few experiences you might like to share, or perhaps you can also tell us how do we entice more women to be involved in this sector based on your own experience or what you've witnessed?
Yes, definitely. In terms of women being involved in agriculture, I see women basically as the backbone for our economy, especially talking about agriculture. So we definitely need to put more investment into women and youth in agriculture, because it would result in improvements in productivity and livelihoods across the board. I would say we need a bit more exposure of successful examples of women involved in agriculture. So for example, we have Keely Holder here with us as one of the leading persons in agriculture right now in Barbados as the Chief Agricultural Officer. We have a newly formed group in Barbados called the Future Farmers Think Tank, which are led by two agripreneurs, Ms. Shadeen Beckles as the chair, and then myself as the vice chair. We have Slow Food Barbados, where we are predominantly women leading a number of activities centered around food security. So we have like the educational gardens where we go into the schools to educate the youth about where their food comes from. And there are a number of women who are definitely successful in the agricultural background. There are also a number of job opportunities besides the regular jobs that you would think of that are associated with agriculture. So we definitely need managers, both in-house for running the agricultural businesses, for social media marketing. We need scientists, engineers, financial analysts. So those are various areas where we can encourage women to make careers within the agricultural sector. So we can also have internships and partnerships with organizations. So I found that that definitely helped me to propel or to go faster in the development of my business in agriculture, and different opportunities to gain education from different programs like the Youth Agripreneurship Program that the Ministry of Agriculture held a few years ago. And there are also a lot of opportunities and a lot of project funding that are available for women and youth to get involved in agriculture, especially when it comes to climate change and using technology in agriculture. So I can say I'm a success story of being a beneficiary of some of those projects. So I was able to implement solar technology, water harvesting methods, being able to digitize my business, so doing all of my financials, harvesting and planting records, and everything basically digital for my business. So there's a lot of potential for women being involved in agriculture. So we just need to have the additional exposure, the training, and yeah, that's basically it, really.
Thank you so much, Christina. And at this point, I recognize that there seems to be an underlying theme of access to finance, changing the image, generally making it more attractive and also more accessible to young people and women and young women, so that we can really maximize the potential that the agriculture sector in the region has for this generation and the generations to come. So thank you so much for everyone who's been contributing thus far. I still want to ask probably a couple more questions. I know we are running a bit over time, so we're going to wrap up shortly. Thank you so much again for joining. And this question would actually be posed to Richard as a value chain specialist and a youth advocate. I think this would be perfect. Which method adds more value to combating food security? Youth-initiated participation or adult-initiated? And then how can each approach support transformation of food systems so that young people feel more included?
Thanks very much, moderator. I just want to express thank you to the UN organizers for inviting me to this. And again, happy International Youth Day to everyone. Youth-initiated participation versus adult-initiated participation. They both have their pros and cons. I think striking a balance between the both ends of that spectrum, youth in one end, adults in the next end, they have to have some kind of a balance somewhere in between. I think that is where the value will be added in terms of that initiative. You see, because the adult, in one end, you have adult initiatives that emphasize more adult leadership and mentorship, which is also required for developing young persons, right? So that the adults can provide and encourage and create frameworks and structures for empowerment, defining roles and responsibilities for youth, providing and advocating for policy changes and institutional reforms, right? All which give youth latitude for exercising initiatives within a framework, and also bring in the youth in that decision-making process. So I think from the adult perspective, the mentorship and leadership roles are very critical for young harnessing, mentoring, guiding, supportive works, and also because they may have some level of authority in terms of influencing the changes that is required. youth initiatives single-handedly are very good. They have people have the debate where youth may figure that they lack leadership. That may not be the case all the time because there are very, very strong youths who know what they want, who have leadership skills and have followers with a vision who will share that vision with the leader. So I think that youths by themselves of peer-to-peer young engagement within groups are always self-motivated. They have that level of autonomy and control so that given that they will be able to relate to each other and be able to propel and have a sector-driven economy that in terms of the agriculture, that they set a nice foundation for that rollout and that dynamism that is required for the required change to address a lot of these problems in the sector. We talk about empowerment and promoting youth, right? And youth development. Again, we have to be able to use the young and old combination to be able to drive that synergy because I think that is required, right? So I think in youth-driven programs, once youth are given more authority with decision making, they can help in deciding the direction, the vision, the changes, the solutions, the problem shooting that is required, which can all, in the end, be expected to facilitate and develop these skills that are required by as leaders for the youths, right? So I think in the end, it's my thoughts is that the youth-centered / adult-supported partnership initiatives with pillars of equal trust and mutual respect among the parties, both groups, is the key to combating food insecurity and building enterprising agribusinesses, right? I think that also it is good to say that in theory, in practice, it's a different thing. We have adults who will have to, in authority, who will have to give up some of their, or relinquish some of their power so that young persons could be the upcoming ones to lead and take over whatever they are doing. They have to put aside the false prides and whatever things that go with it so that youth may be able to be given the chance. And young persons also to have to put up their hand and say, yes, this is what I want to do. This is the direction I want to go. And please, will you help me and guide me through this process? So it's a work, it's in the real world, there are a lot of complexities because we deal with different personalities as persons, but once those are put aside, I think in reality, it's a nice nexus to form. In terms of how public can each approach support the transformation of the food system, I think that the in essence, the adult initiated method will provide, again, the mentorship and leadership and setting that path for as a sturdy rock and a solid support network for the youth that they can fall back on in trying times. I think that also to young person, the older initiatives, older person-driven initiatives should allow youths to make mistakes and let them know making mistakes is okay. But how you learn from them and what do you do is what will build you and make you a better person. So don't put down young people when they make mistakes or don't scold them because that is where things can go a little bad in terms of your mentorship. Build them up, encourage them, motivate them. I think in terms of also sharing of experience and knowledge by these older adults is what is important because you have experiences that you can share, you have knowledge that you can share and pass on to the younger ones, and that is something where there's a bit of benefit into it. Supporting activities for increasing financing and financial access, writing in terms of developing project proposals, trying to see if you can access grants, putting in place soft loan mechanisms, creating private partner linkages with networks that you have already existing, creating the market opportunities for youth in consultation with the youth is something that the adult initiated initiative should take on board. And one of the main things is that you need to, which was just mentioned in terms of training young apprenticeship programs, young internship programs, and on-the-job programs and entrepreneurship. Learning by doing, learning by working with me, learning by working with this mentor, right? I think that is some of the benefits that will be able to help the transform system from the adult initiated networks. I think from the youth oriented networks and the synergies with the youth and the adult, we need to have some more peer-to-peer youth initiatives, learning together and sharing experiences, sharing problems. We need youths to take more active leadership roles and transforming challenges into solutions. I think we have a lot of youth with brilliant minds and innovative solutions, and we just need to harness that more. Also, we need to create environments of continuous learning in terms of technologies, mastering skills, so that you'll be able to do more efficiently what you're already doing, which is the efficiency part of it. We need to develop in our agricultural sector to help produce foods more efficiently and low cost. So many technologies out there. We highlighted some in terms of artificial intelligence, the drone monitoring, drone mapping, GIS, robotics, etc. We need, as youths, to be able to learn and grasp these technologies, adopt them, adapt them, and make it work for us in the sector. And push yourselves, youths, push yourselves to become innovative and become better at what you do. Don't settle for what you have. And keep advocating the authorities, the adults, right, for resources, for policy changes, for the enabling environment which we just spoke about, right, for financial packages, for land policies and land tenure. Keep pushing at it, right? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Richard, for your encouraging and motivating words. The key definitely is a combination of both youth-initiated and adult-initiated participation. So I hope everyone took your words on board, and we can definitely see more collaboration going forward. And before we continue, I just wanted to thank our sub-regional coordinator, Dr. Renata Clark, for her participation today. She has to just make her exit now, but thank you so much. It was great to have you here today with us.
It was great to be with you. Good to be with the youth.
So we are coming close to the end of our panel discussion, which so far has been chock full of information, perspectives, and solutions from everyone today. I'm going to ask one last question, which actually will be open to anyone who wants to answer. And there is a popular misconception that youth is a homogeneous group. To strengthen youth participation in society, there is a need to create an understanding that this group is diverse with various needs based on factors such as gender, ethnicity, nationality, and socioeconomic status. How can this understanding help in addressing the issue of food insecurity?
I would say that when it comes to diversity, the thing about innovation is that innovation comes because of diversity, not in spite of it. It is the diverseness of having all types of people from all around the world coming together, bringing very different perspectives, and having that viewpoint is what leads to innovative and more robust systems. And therefore, while there is diversity, we all still are around a common goal, which is food security. And so if we make room for each person and their perspective, and we give that kind of respect and understanding that because it's not our perspective, that it still has value, and it has important value. There's no, as someone always says to me, God doesn't play dice with the universe. We're not random. We're not here per chance. We're here because that we all have something important to contribute to this world. And once we make room and we make space for that, then we can all play our part in food security and ensuring robust and resilient food systems. It is that making of space and understanding that role.
Thank you so much for that. Does anyone else care to take a chance with that question? Anita, perhaps as an educator, you might have a perspective.
Hi, yes, I was just thinking how that question connects to all of the previous questions, in that making space for youth in agriculture, letting our voices be heard and giving them a chance to act upon that. Youth now are so much more open to inclusion and diversity that we are oftentimes working outside of the normal frameworks, outside of the political frameworks that have already in existence. And so working outside of that, we're able to accommodate people of all different ethnicities, cultures, socioeconomic backgrounds. So when we are creating our own structures to work within, we can include those people. And as we are given that space, how Richard was speaking about the necessity of both adult and youth-led initiatives, making space for youth in the existing structures, but then also giving us the opportunity to create our own, where we are already facilitating this inclusion, is critical.
Thank you so much. So panelists, we have come to the end of our panel discussion. Thank you for everyone joining in. Thank you for everyone watching. Before we get to our closing remarks, I just want to give one last opportunity to any panelists who here or online who may want to contribute a final parting shot, thoughts, words on International Youth Day and the theme, Transforming Food Systems, Youth Innovation for Human and Planetary Health.
Hi, moderator. Permit me, Richard.
Richard, for sure, you can go ahead, and then we will hand over to Regis, who also wants to make a comment.
Thank you. I just want to say that for young persons, almost every young person I know right now are on social media. And we need, in terms of education and promotion of the sector and educational programs that we want to push, to try to link the social media, the TikToks, the Instagram, the Facebook, the Twitter, etc. Have these things linked to agriculture education, have it linked to agriculture advocacy, have it linked to agribusiness and entrepreneurship. We have a lot of information to put out. The underlying thing here is change the way we are doing things right now. The traditional ways have not been working, and young persons are attracted to technology, and we have to use the technology to start transforming and showing the innovation, showing the technological driven sector, showing the profitable sector, which agriculture is. And I think from there on, things will start to unfold, and we can get the youth attracted by changing that stereotype and changing that image of how we do things. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. I definitely agree with your point about incorporating more social media in terms of educating and outreach. It's something that the youth predominantly rely on in today's society. And so I definitely agree with that. So right now we're going to ask Regis. He has a comment. Go ahead, Regis.
Thank you. I think one important point is, and Dr. Clark mentioned it in her introduction on what food systems are. Food systems are more than just the production. It's more than just agricultural production. I think one thing that we haven't talked a whole lot about today is the consumption end. And I think that, you know, if we want to ensure resilient food systems, there needs to be greater demand for local production as well. And we heard from Slow Food Barbados, and around the region, there's huge opportunities, I think, with ensuring that there are greater benefits from tourism in the region. So how do we promote local production and farm to fork and fresh produce, and some of the examples about getting products into supermarkets? I think there needs to be a much greater effort in that regard. And I think there's also a need to get back to some of our ancestral crops within the region, all the dasheen production, the ground provisions. There's a lot of homegrown production here that we need to look at. How do we create a greater demand for that so that there are these opportunities for youth and farmers in general? Thanks.
Thank you so much, Regis. Roshana, I believe you wanted to make a comment.
Thanks so much, Megan. There's been so much said today, and the panelists have all touched on so many different topics that we really need to focus on as we seek to transform our food systems. But one of the things that really struck me was conversation about investment and the fact that while governments recognize how important agriculture, food systems, and all those different things are as it relates to food security, we haven't invested as much in ensuring that our young people and our marginalized communities have the resources that are necessary to ensure that this occurs. And so I think it would be remiss of me not to mention that our theme for UNCTAD Youth Forum is Pull Up, Change the Rhythm. And it really calls on governments and stakeholders to not only talk the talk, but also to walk the walk. And so to invest in the things that we recognize as being priorities in order to see the results that we need to see. The Caribbean is at an important time right now, not only because of the COVID-19 pandemic, but also because of the effects of climate change and what that means for us, not to mention as it relates to food, water, and all of those different things. And so we have to, as young people and also as stakeholders, governments, international organizations like the UN, we have to really sit at this point in time and come up with a solution that works for us, because we cannot afford, it is at the point where we definitely cannot afford to allow these things to just be paperweights, to not have frameworks in place that we are actually going through the process of implementing. And so we have to identify what these things are, how can we do it, and put our resources where they need to be in order to ensure that the Caribbean is not floundering when it comes to food and feeding our people and nourishing our people. And Regis mentioned dasheen and those different things. And what came to mind was the fact that in Barbados, we have dried fruit bowls now. And it's really an innovative take on the dried fruits that we usually we may leave to rot, or we may roast on the side of the road in our communities. And so how do we innovate in order to make some of the things that we have kind of left by the wayside for the sake of development, I think, and for the sake of progress, that we bring back these things and integrate them once again? How do we make it attractive for young people? Because I think that's at the key of it. It's about reshaping and reimagining and transforming what we have been doing our entire lives in order to ensure that we have sustainable development happening around the region.
Thank you, Roshana. You mentioned something about we don't have enough time anymore, and that we can't afford for these policies to be more of a paperweight. And I'm reminded of the recent IPCC report that was published just this week with regards to climate change, giving a red code alert for humanity and the impact of climate change, that we can't afford to wait. The scientists have been saying that forever, and it's getting more and more prudent that we take action now. So I am encouraged by the words that I heard today with regards to the solutions and innovations coming out of this panel discussion. Before we wrap up, I know Keithlin wanted to make a comment. So Keithlin, over to you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My final comment really would be that my hope after this discussion is that we can elevate this discussion from once a year to actually actively involving the persons that are in the agricultural sector into some of the decision-making bodies that are involved in the agricultural sector. Oftentimes we find that decisions are being made without the inclusion of the persons that will be affected. And I think we spoke about diversity and inclusion, and I really would like to see that a reality. And to sway away from the tokenistic approach that we tend to take. So my hope really is to see us elevate this panel discussion into us actually being active decision makers. Thank you.
Thank you, Keithlin. And with such innovative people such as yourself, I'm sure that will definitely be the case. Before we wrap up, we have room for one more question from Christina. Christina, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you very much. I just wanted to add one more comment pertaining to this entire discussion. Another important thing would be including ICT, in having more access, more food security and food access. So as Mr. Ramprasad had mentioned, that social media definitely is a powerful tool in this age to help get in contact with the youth and to encourage them to participate into our food security. So that's very valuable. And, our youth in this age are very visual learners. So if we can make use of the social media platforms, different types of hands-on learning and competitions to garner their interest into the agricultural industry, and also to maintain our food security. So for example, Slow Food, we have our virtual educational gardens where we work with over 10 schools in the island to educate them about the food. And we've also partnerships with other organizations who have the same like mind to propel our food industry. Is very important as well. So we have youth leaders who partner with us to help teach the students about our educating them about their food systems, and they have a deeper connection with working with the youth agribusiness persons that we have involved to teach them about that. Also having the volunteer and internship programs within our organization, we were able to access other youth that wouldn't normally be interested in the access to food and our security. So the various sectors such as film students, marketing students, students in the technology departments. We have worked with a number of them, and in turn, they were able to, go and educate other persons within their fields about food access. And, at some point we would assume that they would get or be involved in some form or fashion into preserving our food security. So that's my 2 cents to that part.
Thank you so much, Christina. And again, thank you to all of our panelists who joined us today for what was definitely a fruitful discussion. We had more than numerous solutions. It's clear that young people do not lack in innovative ideas, do not lack in suggestions. What we seem to lack is access and support and enabling environments. And I'm hoping that through panel discussions such as these, we are able to create more awareness and agitate for more change from those that can create said change. At this point, I am going to hand over for the closing remarks, which will be delivered by Roshana Trim, who is the forum lead UNCTAD for UNCTAD 15 Youth Forum. So Roshana, please.
Thank you so much, Megan. I want to take this opportunity really to thank once again the United Nations Office for Barbados and the Eastern Caribbean. I want to thank all of the panelists, definitely Megan, our moderator. I also want to recognize the presence of the Honorable Saboto Caesar, Minister of Agriculture, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, UN Resident Coordinator, Mr. Didier Trebuch, and Renata and Regis definitely for their contributions. I think this panel discussion is a great starting point on August 12, 2021 for International Youth Day about how the Caribbean can further prioritize food security, food systems, sustainable development, and sustainable food systems, I should say. But also how we can, as young people, we can work together because we've all been doing work in our individual corners, sometimes in silos, sometimes not. How we can work together to amplify what we see as being necessary to ensure the future of the Caribbean, to amplify how governments can support and invest in food security and young people and marginalized groups and their work in the sector, but also how we can build back better and more resilient. I hope that we are able to have a further discussion at some point in time and talk about how we can educate persons who may be interested, but who may not have the access to the information or the resources in order to educate themselves. I think we've been doing great work across the region as young people. I think governments have been trying with support from international organizations, but I do think that we have to go further. This is, like I said before, we do not have the time, we do not have the luxury of waiting or delaying. Neither do we have the luxury of an implementation deficiency at this point in time, because this is urgent and our very future and our livelihood depend on it. And so as I wish each and every person who is watching and listening and here today, happy International Youth Day 2021. I am eager to see where it goes, because I do believe that we have everything that we need to make the change and to create the opportunities and the platforms that we need to transform our food system. So thank you very much and enjoy the rest of your International Youth Day.
Thank you, Roshana, for those amazing closing remarks. You've left me with not much to finish up with on that regard. So I am officially bringing this panel discussion to a close. Again, before we end, I would like to thank all of our panelists and those who are watching and joined us on Facebook, YouTube, and who registered for participating, for watching, for listening to the discussions today. I hope that we all take away something and we're able to agitate for more change, advocate for what it is that we need as young people. We are clearly ready to take the lead, and we just need the opportunity to step into those shoes. So happy International Youth Day. I wish everyone an amazing day, and thank you again for joining us here at the UN House, UN Barbados, and the Eastern Caribbean states. Thank you so much.